We're back on Inside Tennessee. We swapped out Robin Wilhoit for Chris Davis, the election administrator for Knox County.
The image degraded just a little bit here on air, certainly, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Chris, thanks for joining us. And it was a lower than expected turnout for you this year.
Absolutely. And as an election administrator, it's very frustrating when you do all you can to make voting as easy and as accessible as possible for as many Knoxvillians as possible. I know, as both Don and Eddie talked about, we have in excess of 100,000 voters in the city of Knoxville. And when you do everything you can, and it's all over TV, radio, news, social media, and the candidates, I thought, did a pretty good job of attempting to get the word out, and ultimately still with less than 17,000 voters. That's very frustrating. And now with no mayor on the ballot, it's quite possible, and in fact, historical trends would probably tell you, you're probably expecting a lower turnout in the general. I hope that's not the case, but it may trend that way.
Is there anything you think that can be done to improve voting? There's some extreme measures. Australia makes it a crime not to vote. Mm-hmm. There are countries that make it a federal holiday on voting days. I think there are even countries out now that allow electronic voting, email voting, for lack of a better description. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you think we can do as a community or state or nation?
I'm not really sure in Tennessee. I think the thing, when you think about it, I'm just going to go through a few quick things. You can, if you're in the hospital, we'll come and visit you to vote. We vote in every nursing home, licensed nursing home and assisted living facility in Knox County. We give absentee 15 different reasons to vote absentee, with 83 days to request an absentee ballot. 14 days of early voting, including 2 Saturdays in every election. In an August election, 3 Saturdays, an August even-numbered year election, with generous hours, open till 7 p.m. at least 3 nights, and then 12 hours on election day. I'm not sure you can do anything else that's going to get interested and involved citizens who care about their government, their community, and democracy to come out and come out.
These are the most important races a person could vote for in a community, because they affect you every day.
And I will tell you, and we get the calls every single day. Somebody's complaining. They want to know, well, who's my city council person? Who's my county commissioner? Who is? And I said this last week on the show, and I'll reiterate this. There are a lot of people in this town who don't know the difference between India Kincannon and Glenn Jacobs, and that's a shame. And one more thing I'll tell you, saw an MTSU poll just a few years ago, if you'll remember, when Bill Haslam won his second term, so that would have been like 2014, 2015. They did a survey that it was 1 out of 4 Tennesseans couldn't tell you who the governor was. And that, in my mind, is sad. People have to take a little bit of initiative to get involved in their community.
And Chris, when you think about it, between the election this past Tuesday and let's jump to next November, in 15 months, 5 elections. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the possibility of combining to where we only had elections all in the same year, but you had city and county running together, and then you had state and federal offices, that it all happened in 3 elections versus 5 over 15 months?
Well, I certainly think that would increase turnout. But I think, one of the things you have to look at is, given right now, you set up the ballot, you had mayor, you had 3 city council seats, you had judge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the ballot. You put that mayor's race, and I'm not advocating for or against, I'm just saying, you put that mayor's race on the ballot, and all of a sudden you're going to go from being first on the ballot to 10th or 15th or 30th. And we know historically a lot of people don't go all the way down ballot. They go in there to vote mayor or sheriff or governor or president, but they don't make it all the way down the ballot. So while you'll have more turnout, in my opinion, I'm not sure you're going to have a lot more informed voters, but there's certainly some merit to that. And I think that might be something, as you well know, that the legislature may take up.
And it might take you a month to count.
Yeah, at least. Absolutely.
Well, luckily, we're a little more efficient than Arizona. I don't think it would take us that long.
Glad to hear you say that, Commissioner.
And Chris, it's the people my age, really, who are not turning out.
No, it is, unfortunately, when you look at the statistics of over 80% of the voters in this election were 55 and over. That's sad, because every day we get calls from younger voters. We see voters getting registered every single day. But I will tell you, anecdotally, we see a lot of voters that come into our office, and the reason they get registered to vote is because they need proof of residency for something else. They had one girl tell me, this was last week, she came in and she needed proof of residency for a CDL or something. She said, I have no intention of voting. I'm just getting registered. But it's like, we have to register them. So I know, and to give you one more statistic, there are at least 15,000 people in the city registered right now. They've been registered at least a year and a half, so they could have voted in 4 elections. They voted in none, including a gubernatorial election last year.
And Chris, when we think about it, I'm probably one of the younger people that's run, in Knox County in a while, but even I'm in my mid-40s, so when you think about it, what platforms, social media platforms that the younger generation may be using, or politicians or people who are seeking office not using to connect with those voters? I mean, do you see them using like Instagram a lot, or TikTok, things like that, to really engage those voters?
As a parent of a 20-year-old and an almost 18-year-old, I can tell you TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, the politicians who get out and the candidates who get out and use those platforms probably could be more successful, because things get shared on there crazy. I'll give you one example. Last week, and I know that Don doesn't want to hear this word, but it was Trump, and I believe it was Tucker Carlson. I believe it was like 240.
I love hearing the word Trump these days.
240 million impressions, and so that's going to generate some people to the polls one way or the other, I would guarantee you. So I do think that candidates need to be cognizant of that. It's not just knocking on doors anymore, but I will tell you, you look at names like Tim Burchett, you look at names back in the past like Stacey Campfield. The reason they won election after election is because they did get out and they did knock on doors.
Knocking on doors still works in a community race.
Yes, it
Absolutely.
does.
And Don, you have talked about wanting more people to vote for sort of the partisanship that comes in these races.
Yeah, and I don't say this because as a state and as a county that we're red and I'm blue, but I think the more races that are nonpartisan, the better quality of candidate we can get, the less stigma can be attached. There are some good Republicans that I can't vote for in a primary. I won't vote for in a primary because I don't vote in that primary. But I might vote for them in the general. Likewise, there are plenty of Democrats that I think some Republicans would vote for, but won't and can't. And so I think a lot of times that R and a D, I go back to, say, the Darrell Fansler race for a judge a few years ago, finest judge in our courthouse, but he had a D by his name. Okay, and he lost the race only because of that, in one of the least partisan positions someone can hold. So Eddie's going to probably disagree only because they've got all the gold right now. I get that, but I wish that I'm glad the city is nonpartisan. We still sort of know and get an idea, but the city's pretty blue, so we're comfortable. Not true elsewhere.
Chris, do you think that affects turnout?
I absolutely think it affects turnout. When you have a dearth of candidates, particularly in one primary, that's going to, because there's no competition. Why would you go to the polls if you think this guy's going to win or this girl's going to win? That certainly drives turnout, and we hear that
too many times in a county race where I've walked in and walked out in about 30 seconds because I've only had about 4 choices to make.
Yeah.
And we may need to call 911 because Don may pass out when I say I'm not going to actually disagree with what he just said. But I think the other thing that we also need to look at, and I know we've started talking about it on the Election Commission, is moving away from the precinct model to a convenience voting. So no matter on election day where you are in the city or county, you can go vote at any place just
That's
like
right.
you can on early voting. And I think that would help eliminate a lot of the confusion, especially as we talk about, instead of making a national holiday, easier for people to go vote based on where they're working and where they're at with their lives.
And while there will be a lot of pushback on that, you can see the counties that have implemented it like it, because ultimately it's going to take away the precinct-based voting, and I get to go see my family and friends and Aunt B and all the other people on election day. But on the flip side, you can go anywhere you want to go in the county, just like early voting. And in the places that have adopted it, I'll give you one example, is Rutherford County, Murfreesboro. In 2018, all the citizenry was against it. Well, now here we are in 2023, and they love it.
Chris, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back with Robin next.